Hey, Sens fans, welcome to season 4, episode 3 of the Centennial Podcast, a member of the Hockey Podcast Network. And this week, we're really excited to welcome back Graeme Nichols. If you aren't familiar with Graeme, we've had him on a couple times before. He's written for The Athletic and the Ottawa Citizen. So now he writes for his own Substack blog called Rome in a Day. It's pretty good. Check it out. It can be sent right to your email, and you can just read them on the fly. So it's nice to have that. And Graeme, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, I appreciate coming back on. I enjoy talking to you guys. How have you been? Bennett, Matt, everything's good?
Yeah, been good. Been a busy off season, both in Sens land and in Bennett land. So I imagine we're all feeling that way. A lot of stuff that's been delayed over the last couple of years happening in quick succession over 2022. That's for sure.
Yeah.
How about you?
I was just, I'll chime in. I was just gonna say I just moved into a new place, so I'm very tired, but we're gonna get through this and we're gonna make it happen.
Right on. Yeah, moving's never fun, so I'm totally empathetic to what you had to go through.
Perfect. Well, first off, some recent news that just happened. Cam Talbot, his injury. He was listed day to day. Everyone's like, okay, cool. He'll be back in time for the regular season. Not the case. Sens announced he's out 5 to 7 weeks. Darren Dreger said that he thinks you could, at the best positive estimate, say 3 to 4 weeks, and he could come back. So with him being out of the lineup, the Sens go to the waiver wire and they end up picking up Marcus Hellberg, who's played a handful of years in the KHL, but only played, I believe, like a few games in the NHL. So what do you think about Cam Talbot being injured, and how does that affect the Sens start to the season?
First and foremost, I think it's a blow to the player. Like you're talking about a guy who's coming in here to hopefully vie for the number one job, right? I know everybody talks about this being like a 1A, 1B situation with Anton Forsberg, but Cam Talbot, I think, had every intention of claiming and putting a stake in on that number one job. And, for a guy who's slated to test unrestricted free agency at the end of the year, I think this could have been the perfect opportunity for him to build his resume and pad it a little bit and hopefully put himself in a position to cash in on one last final contract. I think he's like 35 years old. So he doesn't have much more time in the league. And, you talk about being on that wrong side of 30 and the age curve that goes along with that. Like this offseason coming out might represent the last time that he'll be able to cash in on a multi-year deal. So I think it's a huge, huge thing for him specifically, because if Anton Forsberg takes this job and runs with it, there's no guarantee that Cam Talbot's going to be the number one guy moving forward. So I just think it's a huge blow for him. And it's not easy coming in like a quarter of the way through the season. I wrote in one of the pieces that I wrote recently when the news broke is that, if he does miss upwards of 7 weeks, which is the estimated timetable, you're talking about maybe 2 months of hockey, which is going to be 22 games. So that's a quarter of the season wiped right there. Yeah. So that's a significant chunk. And, for an organization that's made a lot about their poor starts over the last couple of years, like they can't really afford to get off on the wrong foot. You talk about all the positive vibes and everything that they did well to acquire some awesome forwards up front to kind of insulate the young core that they've drafted and developed. They can't afford to get off on the wrong foot, whether it's Pierre Dorian or DJ Smith or whomever. Like the pressure is just going to ratchet up on these guys. And, if we're talking about Magnus Hellberg, like this organization has gone to the scrap heap before. They found guys who've, they haven't really played much in this league and they've actually come in and flourished. You could look at guys like Forsberg or Mike Condon. Ottawa's had success kind of finding these reclamation project goalies over time. And maybe this Hellberg guy is just going to be the more recent example of that.
Yeah. And how much leash do you think that someone, let's say DJ Smith, has if, as you say, the Sens get off to another rough start this season, find ourselves in a bit of a hole after 10 games, maybe 20 games? Like, do you think that's it for a guy like DJ, or do you think that with an injury to Talbot and, there's still going to be a little bit of flexibility given to him?
It's a great question. I think the easiest fall guy or the easiest motivator would be to fire the coach if the team doesn't start well. It's not like you can really change up or shake up the lineup too much, right? I mean, I know we keep talking about Jakob Chychrun possibly being another defenseman who might get traded to Ottawa, but until the organization pulls the trigger on that deal and brings in another defenseman, I think the easiest way to motivate from within is probably to fire the coach. And I think if you look at Belleville and the work that Troy Mann's done down there, I think that's you have a guy who can step in, who has experience coaching these guys, who's had a lot of success at the AHL level. They have that guy in hand already. So I think that would be the easiest thing that they could do. But DJ Smith's going to be under a lot of pressure. And I kind of empathize with him a bit because, he deserves a chance to show that he can actually mold this roster and make it successful. I think he's earned that over the last couple of years. And, like not that long ago, we were talking about Pierre Dorian in the same vein. Like he'll be under a lot of pressure, and then he has the offseason that he had, and everybody loves Pierre Dorian again. So I think DJ probably deserves that same kind of opportunity just to see where this goes. And I do think he's under a lot of pressure. Now, like you said, I think there are some circumstances like losing one of your top two goalies is a significant blow early in the year, and it puts him behind the eight ball a little bit, especially because Ottawa's blue line still, I like some pieces, but it's not one of the strongest ones in the Eastern Conference or the NHL. It's probably in the bottom 5 or 10. So, it's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy for him, but I think he's just the de facto fall guy if this thing goes sideways quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It'll be interesting to see how it goes for him. And you raised the prospect of the Sens blue line and, all the chatter about Jakob Chychrun. We recently had Richie Flores of the Corey and Richie Show. It's an Arizona Coyotes podcast. You can check out our YouTube for the video there. We're talking about what a potential trade between Ottawa and Arizona might look like for Chychrun. And there's been a lot of chatter about this possibility and, people debating online about whether he would actually be an upgrade to the Sens blue line. What does he do that a guy like Artem Zub doesn't do is something that people were chattering about today. I was wondering your opinion. Do you think Chychrun is an answer for this organization? Do you think that he would be a significant enough upgrade to a blue line to move the needle? And what do you think he might be able to bring to the Sens if they do go out and acquire him?
I think he would absolutely help. The question becomes opportunity cost versus positional need. And, he's a left defenseman who'd be asking to play his offside. And I know he has experience doing that, but I think if you look at the market right now, he's the most available best player, like by and large, the best player who's available, might be the only player who's available because he's expressed his desire publicly to be traded from Arizona. So he's the best guy on the market. Does that mean you have to go out and target him and give up the world to get him? Because that's what Arizona is holding out for. It's a great question. Ottawa's kind of behind the eight ball. Like their defense is not good. I think once you get past Zub, Shabbat, and Sanderson, even though I think that puts a ton of pressure on Sanderson, but I'm pretty optimistic that at least he'll be able to hold his own this year as a rookie. It puts a lot of pressure on those three guys, and barring injury, it could get depleted even further. So it is a step. I think there's a lot of cost control and term left with Chychrun, which is attractive. But again, you're talking about a guy who's a left defenseman who will be asked to play the right side. And just because he's the best available now doesn't mean he might be the best available 2, 3, 4, 5 months from now. But the problem therein, right, is Ottawa could be out of it by then. So that's it. It's a really difficult question to answer. And what are you comfortable giving up? Are you comfortable giving up a Ridley Gregg? Are you comfortable giving up a 2023 first round pick? If not, is it going to be lottery protected? Like there's so many different variations. And until you really see like the final variation of whatever the trade winds up being, or if it ever comes to fruition, it's hard to sit here and say, well, I'm not comfortable giving up this or this or this. But I think like you got guys like Lassie Thompson, Jacob Bernard Docker, guys who've been in the system for a while who haven't really asserted themselves. They played okay in spurts. They look like they could be NHL regulars at some point. But like the question I always ask myself when we get into like this prospect projection on the back end is like, okay, if these guys are NHL regulars, how good can they be? It's the one thing that drives me nuts about like prospect projections and everything else is everyone says, well, this guy will play NHL games. And it's like, well, anyone can play NHL games. Like you can find guys who can play NHL games on the waiver wire when training camps end every year. Like big deal. I want impactful guys. Like, are you drafting impactful guys who can play, in the middle top portion of a lineup? And that's the biggest question. And, if you have reservations about the upside of some of these prospects that you've already developed in Belleville, maybe those are some of the guys that you try and package out. And then, you've got a guy like Alex Formenton who's got this hockey candidate thing hanging over his head. And you see guys like Tyler Mott kind of thrive in the role that Alex Formenton had vacated. Maybe that's a guy you try and jettison as well. But again, like, who's trading for Alex Formanton with this scandal hanging over Hockey Canada? So there's some pieces you could definitely move and consider dangling it as potential trade bait, but it's just a matter of, I just don't know if there's a good fit right now for what Arizona might want for what Ottawa is willing to give up. And it might just be a case where Ottawa might just be better served just waiting, paying a lesser price, or targeting another defenseman on another team who's going to wind up being a little bit more cost effective.
Sens fans, it's finally time to hit the ice again, and thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you're in for the season of a lifetime. New customers can bet $5 on any team and get $200 in free bets if they win. Personally, I'm probably slamming Shane Pinto at plus 3,500 for the Calder odds, but that's just me. If that wasn't enough excitement, you can turn small bets into bigger payouts with same-game parlays. Combine multiple bets like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more for your shot at an even bigger payout. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your money whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Bet $5 on any NHL team to win their game and get $200 in free bets if they do. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL.
Now, I do want to touch on prospects because you brought them up. But before we get to that, I have seen some people, in the Twitterverse, which may not be the best gauge of hockey fans generally, but, saying that with a guy like Cam Talbot being injured and having Magnus Hellberg come in, is there more pressure on the Sens to shore up their defense in order to better insulate the goaltending just in case, Forsberg can't go or something like that, and Hellberg has to come in and try and save the day?
Again, I think there's so much pressure on this team to get off on the right foot. I think, if Ottawa gets off to a bad start, a lot of that optimism and hope and the positive vibes that everybody was just loving for the last 3 months will slowly erode. And that's,
Or quickly erode.
Well, it's just one of those things, right? It's just, there's so much pressure on these guys to win right now and show that they can be competitive and put the right step forward. And, I don't want to hang like the Alex DeBrincat negotiations and contract extensions moving forward. But I mean, here's a guy who's in the last year of his deal before he becomes a restricted free agent. You kind of have to put the best foot forward with him, and you have to put a competitive product on the ice and show him that you're serious about winning here and you're trying to encourage this guy to be a part of it. And not that I'm saying that that's more important than team wins or anything else, but I think that's just something that you have to consider as well. Like, you're really trying to sell this guy in the city, the market, the group that's here. And and then you got to fit everybody together in terms of the cap situation moving forward too. So that's another challenge that they have to go through. But it's kind of an unenviable position. I'm kind of surprised that, mind you, I'm saying that without really knowing what the offseason market was. Like, I wrote a piece during the offseason about underrated defensemen that Ottawa could possibly target. But going into the season without another right defenseman, I think is almost like negligent personally. But I don't want to dump on Pierre Dorian's offseason because I thought he did pretty solid job locking up the pieces that he did. So it's just, that is the glaring concern. It's just, how do you add all these quality pieces and then come into the offseason without adding that right defenseman that you so desperately need? Because that was the number one object. That was what he was supposed to do this offseason, and it never got done. So
yeah,
it's a huge oversight, and I would hate to see it be like the Achilles heel that kind of undermines this whole thing. So we'll see what they do moving forward. But if they wind up trading for Jake Chychrun, I think Arizona's got them by the balls, so to speak. They have all the leverage. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting take. I think it's kind of funny because from our perspective, I would agree with you. I think that, Arizona is in a position to kind of rake Ottawa over the coals. But it was interesting because when we had Richie on, he thought the opposite. He was like, I could see Arizona getting a first and a good prospect at this point, because he's like, with the injury stuff coming out, with him at the press conference saying he's still looking for an out. And he said that the team likely won't want to go into the regular season with this hanging over their heads. He thinks they're in a time crunch to get something done. So I think we'll see either way at some point, whether he gets traded to Ottawa or to another team. really who gets the best of that deal, but it definitely is an interesting topic, and it really seems like, and I could totally be wrong, but it does seem like Ottawa is tunnel visioned on getting a deal done for Jake Chychrun. So it's something to definitely watch and see how that unfolds. But like I said, I want to go back to the whole prospect aspect. We talked about Ridley Gregg and the possibility of him being a deal for Chychrun, and a lot of Sens fans on Twitter, hyping up his potential and what he showed at the World Juniors. So do you think that Ottawa is kind of starting to enter that phase where, not like Tampa, where they've shown they can win, but kind of like Tampa in the sense that they can now start flipping out prospects and picks and trying to just upgrade the roster and not worry about the draft so much and just look at what they have and say, how can we upgrade this to win today?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I've had this conversation with other people as well, and one of the things I always kind of look at is like most of Ottawa's good young players are graduating. Like aside, Shane Pinto should have lost his eligibility as a rookie last year, but he didn't because he got hurt. Jake Sanderson's playing this year; he's going to have hopefully a huge impact. But beyond those guys, like really, Gregg is probably the only guy I can comfortably say that's in the system right now who's probably destined to have a good NHL career. I can't safely say that. I'm not saying that there isn't anyone in the system right now who won't be a productive NHLer, but I think like in terms of like safely projectable high upside guys, I think like really Gregg's that guy. And beyond that, and then that's the risk, right? If you start trading a lot of the prospect capital, it's going to get thinner, and it's going to make it harder to acquire guys that you need to insulate this core that they have and acquire the guys that you need to really push the things forward. But at the same time, you also have your young core locked up for the foreseeable future. And if you feel comfortable moving prospects because you have a lot of this young talent locked up for the next like 5 to 7, 8 years, then sure, totally go for it. So I from a philosophical standpoint, I like understand both sides. It's just a matter of, I think it's just a matter of finding the right deals that make sense. I wouldn't necessarily just trade away and got my minor league system just to like make a splash now. It's got to be deals that make sense, deals that aren't short-sighted deals. You want pieces that are going to be around for like the next 2, 3, 4 years if you can, and kind of just build and grow this thing internally. But it's interesting. Pierre Dorian's not afraid to pull the trigger on a big deal, and we've seen that before. So he's under pressure too, right? So it's interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see how this unfolds because I could see the season going really well. I could see it going sideways a bit, and it's going to be entertaining. And I just don't know how it's going to work out. We'll see.
Yeah, I think we're all eager to see how the season is going to go. It's been such a crazy off season. All of acquiring both of the white whales of Sens of the Sens Twitterity, if you will, in Giroux and DeBrincat, and then in addition, like locking up some of our young stars. It's been such a transitional period, and we're right on the cusp now of do we start thinking about prospects as trade bait, or are we still thinking about them as these are the guys that are going to be roster players for our team during a competitive window? And I think we're staring at, I'm not saying I don't think the window is open just yet, but we're starting to get to maybe where the window could open. And, a guy like Ridley Gregg, it's a tough question. Like, he's really talented, and I think he will be such an interesting and dynamic NHL player. But where would he fit in our current roster? Because our current roster is more set than it's been for about 5 seasons now. We've got a top 6 pretty much locked up for the next 2 to 3 years at least.
Especially down the middle, right?
Especially down the middle, exactly.
So if he's not playing center where you have Pinto, Stützle, and Norris locked up, then is he going to play left wing? And you could totally see him on the left wing at some point, but the path has to be cleared a little bit for him, right? So
exactly. We've got Joseph locked up for a couple of years too on that third line, where he might have slotted in otherwise.
Sure, but I mean, like really, Gregg on an inexpensive 3-year ELC as your third on left winger, it looks pretty good, right? So
yeah.
And Tyler Mott's only under contract for 1 year. If he has a big season, I wouldn't be surprised to see him cash out and try and find a multi-year deal in the offseason. So that to me, that's kind of like the place where I probably earmark Gregg for the next like 2 years, third line left wing. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him spend a significant amount of time in Belleville just to try to let him develop on his own time, and then if injuries happen, call him up. But aside from him and Belleville, I'd trade any of those guys in the right deal. Like Like, obviously it depends on who you're getting back, but I mean, like, I don't know. There's a lot of young guys who just haven't been able to really move the needle. They've had some, some decent success in Belleville and whatnot, but I'm just not bullish on their ability to be impactful NHLers. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that some AHL time for Greg, give him a little bit more time to cook while we figure out where he could possibly slot in and help this team, would be a good way of handling it.
And even
Now,
Eric Branstrom, right? Like, if Eric Branstrom gets off to a good start playing on, like, if he wins the camp job and plays on the third pairing to start the season with like Nick Holden, for example, if Branstrom shows what he did in that last preseason game, he's another guy who I could see them packaging right away to get a guy that they're interested in. If he starts playing well ahead of where we've seen him the last like 2-3 years, then he's a candidate. I could see them moving immediately if you rebuild some of that value. So he's another guy I'd throw in the mix there too.
Totally. Now, we've mentioned a couple of times the eventful offseason that the Sens have had. I just want to, take a step back and think about everything that's happened in the last little bit. The Sens organization has gone through a transformative period both on and off the ice. We have a potential new arena deal, the renewed relationship with the Sens Foundation, bringing guys like Alfie, Phillips, and Neil back into the fold. All of these have gone a long way towards healing rifts in the community and, hinting towards the long-term future of the team here in Ottawa. There's also been success for the on-ice team by some key trades and acquisitions, some key extensions for guys like Stutzler and Norris, even someone like Matthew Joseph. All of this happened in very quick succession, starting in the spring and over the course of the summer. And our question for you is, what do you think was this decisive factor driving this recent transformation? Do you think that it was the shakeup that we've had at the very top of the organization? Do you think this was the plan all along? Do you think that just the stars aligned and allowed us to get all of our ducks in a row? What do you think has been driving all of this change we've seen recently?
It is weird to think like 4 months ago that Athletic article was being dropped, right? Like, I think it was June when that dropped, and everyone's like, "Oh crap, here we go." And whether you liked the article or you hated the timing of it or whatnot, I think at the root for me was, okay, like, how deep is the rot in the organization? Is it just the owner? Does it extend to his underlings? Are these people who are just like helplessly, they're employed, but are like they helpless to make decisions because he's micromanaging everything and putting a stamp on everything? Like, what are the inner workings of this organization? How are they reflected in what they do and everything else? And I think the answer over the past 4 months is that there was an owner who put a stamp on everything, and often it was to the detriment of the people around him who wanted to make decisions to kind of push us in the right direction. And I think you can see it reflected in a lot of the societal issues that they're kind of putting under the microscope and shedding light on and marketing themselves towards and whatnot. And it's just for the betterment of the team. I think fans have been kind of clamoring for this, saying, hey, like, you guys have done the bare minimum the last couple of years, like, step up and actually do something. And to their credit, they have. And like team president Anthony LeBlanc he's been much more at the forefront these past 4 months than I think I saw him in the first year and a half, 2 years that he was on the job. So I think, to answer your point, I think it started at the top, and everyone underneath them, I think, is kind of just allowed to do their jobs now, and they're allowed to promote this product. They're allowed to promote stuff in the community, and they're engaging this fan base. They're engaging the alumni. They're engaging old businesses that want to get back involved with the organization again, because it's starting to look healthier and healthier all the time. And over the past 5 years, I think everybody was kind of rallying around the players, saying, hey, we got to support these guys on the ice, because if we don't, nobody will. And I think we're starting to see that change, where they actually are starting to get that support from the organization themselves. So I said this in a couple pieces. It was, for the first time in a long time, it felt like a normal off season. It felt like they were actually just a sports franchise that you could cheer for. And we weren't talking about the off ice stuff. We weren't talking about the distractions. I know there's the Hockey Canada scandal, and I don't want to diminish that or whatnot, but aside from that, everything felt normal. It was just, you're just analyzing potential line combinations and trades and what the prospect of trade returns could be for a Jake Chychrun, for example. And it just felt like normal hockey discourse and discussion with fans, and it felt healthy, and it was a long time coming. I think everybody's in a better spot for it. So
Yeah, and I think even like when you look at FanFest this year, it was a lot of fun and it was nice to go. I was able to chat with both DJ and Pierre, and that was kind of cool, and grab a photo with them. And they also having those players just sit ice level and talk to the audience and take questions from like the kids question period where just the kids got to ask questions, and none of the serious stuff that the rest of us would be asking. So it's cool to see them do that. And I think it's like a whole other aspect that I don't think has really existed in the off ice community for the last few seasons. So yeah, it was just really nice to see that as well. And I'm not sure if you got a chance to pop over there, but it was a cool vibe.
Okay. No, didn't have the chance to. Kids, man.
Yeah, there were a lot there, but probably a bit older than yours. But well, that's all the questions we had for you, honestly. Thanks for your insight and everything. It's always great to get to chat with you. And
no, it's always good talking to you guys too. It's always a pleasure. You guys are well spoken and articulate, and it's the time flies. I know we had this clock at the top saying how much time is remaining, and I don't know. Every time I talk to you guys, it seems like it flies by really quickly. So thanks.
It does.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And I hope you had a good summer. Looking forward to some good Sens hockey this fall. And
hopefully meaningful hockey, right?
Yes,
that's the big thing.
That's very much so. Did you want to plug your socials and all that?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Graeme Nichols. You can also find my work at Roman Today. It's the Roman Today blog, but the address is gnichols@substack.com or .substack.com. So yeah, just those are the mediums, and look forward to doing this again sometime soon with you guys.
Awesome. And for everyone watching, as you can see, we're on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at the Centennial Podcast. We're on Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. The Centennial Podcast on there. So follow us on there. Follow Graeme. Check out both of our content, and go Sens go. We'll see you next time.
Go Sens go. Thanks, Graeme.